What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHillIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our YouTube channel as well, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me from the Peterson Events Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And, AJ, we're here following Carolina's 76-74 loss to Pittsburgh. ACC loss, Carolina dropping to 1-2 in ACC play, 9-5 on the season. So, disappointing loss for the Tar Heels, who against a Pittsburgh team who's, I think, a lot better than people expected to be this year. And I think in a lot of ways probably deserved to win it based on how they played down the stretch, which we're going to talk about right now. Before we do that, though, I do want to read off some stats, AJ, and then we'll dive into the first thing I want to hit on. Mondo Bacot led the way, 22 points, 13 boards, another double-double for him, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists for RJ Davis, despite some struggles shooting, particularly in the second half. 7 of his 9 points in the second half coming from the free throw line. Pete Nance, 10 points, 5 rebounds, despite some, not really, we'll talk about it here, some issues with, I think, a back issue or something going on with him as well, because he was coming in and out of the game a lot. AJ, let's start with that 31-14 run for Pittsburgh in the second half that began at that 11:55 mark, because it changed the game. It was the change in the game. 31-14, I mean, that's a 17-point difference right there. And again, I thought that really was what changed it for North Carolina, because they couldn't quite respond to that. And it seemed like they kind of got punched in the mouth a little bit during that stretch and never really recovered. I know you kind of talked to Armando about that in his post-game press interview, I should say. We'll hit on that. Yeah, we'll hit on that, specifically what Armando said a little bit later on, because I thought it was an absolutely fantastic interview from him, the spokesperson of the basketball team in a lot of ways. But talk to me about that run, because, again, it was something Carolina just could never really recover from and get over the hump after that.
So I asked Hubert after the game, said, what, you're up 9 when they go on a 31-14 run? I said, what, 1, 2, 3 things, why that happened? And he kind of chuckled, because there were probably 4, 5, 6, and 7 as well.
Yeah.
They didn't defend, and their offensive execution got poor. Pitt was doubling Armando, but Armando was beating their guys most of the game. He was drawing fouls. He was scoring on them. I thought Armando looked bouncy and quick, even though he had some turnovers. His spin move was working really well. His spin move has actually been working really well the last few games, and it's been really decisive too. When he spins, he squares, he's able to score. But they went away from him. And I asked Armando about, because that was during that period. I asked Armando, I said, was it something Pitt was doing, or was it just, they weren't getting you the ball? It's just, and he said they weren't getting me the ball. I said, so it wasn't something Pitt was doing? He goes, no. So he wasn't happy that they stopped feeding him. There's no doubt about that. He made that very clear. You can go watch the video on our YouTube channel and on our website. So I think that was part of it. I think they went away from what was working offensively. When they went up 9, 55-46, and Pitt calls a timeout, I thought, they're playing good basketball. They're doing the kinds of stuff you need to do to win on the road, because Pitt's a good team. Mm-hmm. This is not a couple of years ago. This is a good club. Capel's got the kinds of guys in there to play his style now. They're physical. They kind of bump and grind you a little bit. I really like the way he rotates and uses all those big guys. But, none of them are supremely skilled, but they're big and they can cause problems. And they're ACC reserve bigs, basically. And you can win a lot of games when you have some of the other skill that they have and you throw those kind of bigs out there. So they were a formidable task for the Tar Heels. In fact, I would say that Pitt's better than Michigan based on what I've seen in person here in the last week. Mm-hmm. So that being said, I think it was on Carolina for going away from what was working. I don't think Pitt did a whole lot to take them out, except there were 2 stretches in each half where I thought Pitt really defended the perimeter very well, and Carolina had a lot of turnovers. In fact, a lot of them were like foul line extended toward midcourt. They didn't even get the ball near the basket on a few of those. They had 4 straight at one point in the first half. But during that run, they had a few of those as well. And there were some unforced turnovers that told me that some of the minds weren't where the minds needed to be. And that was what Armando hit on as well. Caleb stepping on the out-of-bounds line. He's got to know where he is in that situation. Now, there was no movement either. Like, there was a lack of movement. And I thought there was some interesting player groupings out there. DeMarco Dunn, who didn't play in the last 5 games with a hand injury, is out there for extended time. And much of it was during the run. Pete Nance comes out with 4:48 left, doesn't go back in. maybe another big in the lane to kind of maybe affect some of those drives that Pitt was regularly getting could have worked. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to second guess Hubert here. I'm just throwing some stuff out there because what they were doing was clear it wasn't working, and they kept doing it for a while, and then it continued to not work. And
was Nate?
I think, I think they got got really tight as a result. They were loose up until it wasn't just when Pitt tied them; it was when Pitt tied them again. I thought then they started getting a little bit tight on both ends of the floor. What were you going to ask?
Was there an injury issue with Nance? Because I saw him standing at the end of the bench.
I don't know. We talked to a couple of us talked to him in the locker room after the game. He was standing up. I didn't see any ice packs or anything, but I wasn't looking for anything. We didn't know of anything. I don't remember seeing, the three of us, Adam, Seal, and I, we're everywhere they go, and sometimes we'll share information with each other. And if someone would have seen Doug Halverson talking to him, looking at him, sure one of us would have said, "Hey, Doug's talking to Pete," but I didn't see that. But I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just didn't see it. Okay. I don't know how much of an issue that was. Pete played well early and then just kind of disappeared for long stretches, which he tends to do in this offense. It's like they forget he's out there sometimes, and he's not. He gets open by just kind of being open on the perimeter. So I think he and Armando still trying to figure out how to play off each other. But as far as that 31-14 run goes, offensively, they just got away from what they were doing. Defensively, they couldn't stop Burton. Yeah. Couldn't stop him. As simple as that. Hubert said after the game, and I think Burton's the next point we're going to talk about, so we can morph into that right now if you want. But Hubert said that we had nobody that could guard him. Period. And you don't hear Hubert say that very much because he's got some good defensive players. When Caleb's dialed in, he's a good defensive player. Leakey's almost always a good defensive player. But I was curious why Dunn was out there so much, especially during that stretch. And a couple of times he was there on it. They tried everything to stop him. They just couldn't. Yeah. I'll give you a stat about Burton, who, by the way, scored 31 points, was 14 for 17 from the floor. But four of his first 5 buckets were jumpers. Mm-hmm. His next 6 were layups. Mm-hmm. 8 of his last 9 field goals were layups.
He's beating in different ways, yeah.
There's a lot of different things that always go into why a team wins, why a team loses. But honestly, if they could figure out a way to slow him some and have a couple of better, cleaner offensive possessions, then they win the game. But they didn't. So there was a lot of anger in the locker room. Armando was ticked off, and I think Hubert was justifiably upset, and RJ was expressing that because this was a game they had. They had a 9-point lead. I asked Pete, I said, how do you guys learn to get your foot on a throat and just apply pressure? Mm-hmm. And that's the next step for these guys. Well, there's a lot of next steps for these guys, but that's something that they're going to have to figure out how to do because they kind of had Michigan in a situation like that and let them off the hook a little bit, and that ended up being a near nail biter as well. So there are a lot of things this club needs to do better. And I think we saw all of it right on the floor tonight. We saw a lot of really good things from this team, but we also saw some of the things that they're going to have to fix, and they're going to have to fix quickly because there's a lot of losable games in front of them right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And I want to hit on that second half a little bit more, particularly with some of with Carolina's players. I got a stat for you that I thought Armando Bacot played well for majority of the game. I don't think he was the issue at all. But in the second half, Leaky Black, Caleb Love, RJ Davis, and Pete Nance combined to shoot just 3 for 16 and 1 for 8 from 3-point land. So those guys went missing. In particular, it was a really bad day for Caleb. Just didn't have it. Didn't look. We've talked about it off camera. I'm not trying to go in on Caleb because I didn't think he's won Carolina many games, and he's also cost Carolina in some games. And I thought he cost him in some ways today because I think we've seen throughout Caleb's career that there's 2 ways he can hurt you. Sometimes he can kind of shoot you out of a game by just continuing to fire the ball when it's not going in, and sometimes he can kind of go missing. And I thought he, in some ways, kind of went into a little bit of a shell today and went missing in some ways. Didn't have a lot of shot attempts in the second half. Wasn't really doing a lot. I was a couple of times in the game where you kind of forgot he was out there just because you're so used to him being a big time player and a big game player. And today that wasn't the case. And I don't think this UNC team is good enough to have him have games like that. I think they can win games when he doesn't play well. I think they've proven that in the past before. but they can't have a game where he's not really doing anything. And obviously, like I said, had that turnover when it mattered. I believe there's about 1:08 left on the clock after that turnover. And I really thought Carolina never recovered. I thought that was really when the game ended after that. I thought it was
a 3-point game. It was a 3-point game. And then Pittsburgh went down, scored, and took a 5-point lead. And then Carolina was in kind of scramble mode after that. So
to me, it was the same issues. It was guard play was an issue again today. It's kind of what I'm getting at.
It didn't look to me like Caleb had a ton of juice today, but I also thought it was kind of an awkward game maybe for him because so much of the emphasis was into Armando. I even tweeted out, I said, Armando could draw 20 fouls today.
Yeah.
And they should have just given him the ball every time down the court, draw, foul, score. Every once in a while, they got to a shot or something like that. But in a game like that, sometimes Caleb does sort of disappear because he's not on the ball. And I actually do think he gets a little credit for not trying to force things, because there have been times in the past when it's been a while since Caleb's taken a shot. He takes a couple wild shots because he's just got to get a shot up. He's a scorer. Scorers have to shoot. But I didn't see him really do that too much today. He just wasn't really super involved. And I think where more criticism in his performance might rest is on the defensive side.
Yeah.
He can be a really good defender at times. I just didn't think the juice was there as much today. And that was from the beginning. I thought the team had good energy out of the gate. I thought they looked like they were ready to play. And then they had that series of turnovers, and Armando had 4 turnovers in the first half. So a lot of that was on him. But they kind of let Pitt had to call an early timeout because it was 11-3, and they kind of gave them a little bit of room there. So that's where this team needs to grow. It's December 30th. It's interesting that people expect last March and expect early April all the time when this team plays. And I believe the team cut the cord last week. I think the fans need to cut the cord too. They need to understand this is all new. This is different. This has to take its own shape, has to take its own form. And they're in the process of doing that. And sometimes you've got to have your foot on someone's throat and then it slips off and you lose a game in order to get better at putting your foot on someone's throat. And this is something this club has to learn. Last year, they weren't that team. It was close games or they get blown out or so. They didn't pound that many teams last year. So they weren't in position to apply the foot on the throat and pull away like a lot of classic Carolina teams in the past have done. So they need to develop that. And we saw that against Michigan, and we saw it clearly today. To me, I think that's the story. That they need to adopt that layer that so many of Dean's teams and Roy's teams did, and even Guthrie's teams, the uber talented 98 team was able to do. That's so classic Carolina. You're in a game, kind of back and forth. You're up 8, 8 minutes left, 9 minutes left, and then boom, 14-4 run. You put a team out and you win the game.
Yeah.
And let's see, I'll just take it off. So this team needs to have that. This group has never been that team. They weren't that team when RJ and Caleb were freshmen. Armando's never been on a team like that. They certainly weren't that his freshman year. They weren't that way last year. So they have to develop that. It's been a while since North Carolina knew how to apply a foot to the throat. So I think that's one of my big takeaways from this game. And I asked Pete about that. And, Pete doesn't want to be critical or anything like that, but he kind of agreed. And there's a little extra can of spinach that you need to pop in order to do that. And I thought that for a while, this team was playing as if they had consumed enough spinach. I'm going with the spinach metaphor here. And then when they needed another can or two, they looked around, they couldn't find it. And Pitt was like chugging that stuff, right? And that's how 31-14 run happens. That's how you lose a game that you were pretty much kind of the better team for 30 minutes. There were a couple of times where a couple of us were like, God, they seemed like they should be up by a lot more than 6 because they were doing a lot of pretty things. But you got to apply that foot, man. And the really good teams do. Watch Kansas. Watch when Gonzaga is really good. Watch the way they do it. Watch the really good teams. They apply that foot. And this team needs to learn how to do that. And when they do learn how to do that, then they're going to avoid a lot of stuff like this. They'll still lose every once in a while, Jacob, but their whole of their game will go up a healthy notch. And I also think that their mindsets will go up. There's sort of right now, there's a little bit of, hey, we're North Carolina. We made that run. I still think that stuff happens sometimes with guys. But when you get to a point where you're going to apply the foot and the opponent knows you're going to apply the foot, you can win mental games when you're in that 9, 10, 11, 12 point margin area. And that wasn't the case today.
Yeah.
Pitt's like, nah, that's not happening. Carolina's like, oh, we don't know how to do it. Next thing you know, they were lost out there for a while. And as they were lost, Mr. Burton and the Panthers are chipping away at that lead and taking the lead.
Yeah, no doubt. Building off this, I'll let you go in a second, but we'll kind of talk about what this means. Building that, I want to read a couple of quotes from Armando, which you can see his post-game video, because I thought it was great. You can see it on our YouTube channel. Coming at you here is, I don't know how we all can't come in and be locked in and give such a shitty performance, is the word he used. And another quote from him is, it's frustrating. I thought we had turned a corner. And that was a big theme of what we talked about this week. You and David did a podcast. We did the UNC basketball show, following the wins over Ohio State and Michigan. It felt like this team had turned a corner. I thought Armando Bacot summed it up perfectly to me today. It kind of felt like, the last couple of weeks was one step forward, and today was kind of two steps back again, because you're losing a game in which you probably shouldn't lose, and icing on top of the cake is you were in control and probably the better team, like you said, for 30 minutes of it. So, AJ, talk to me about, I know Armando was obviously frustrated, very frustrated, and I thought he spoke a lot of things that Carolina fans will like to hear, and I think he is, before our eyes, and has been for a while, the spokesperson of this team, and it's not even close for anybody else, in my opinion. He's been fantastic with his messages. So what was the vibe kind of like in the locker room for the post-game interviews? Because I've only seen Armando's before I had to hop on here. He seemed very frustrated. With other guys in the locker room, just as frustrated as he was?
Yeah, I didn't see everybody. A couple of them were in the show. We weren't in there very long. We got three guys, and then Hubert was coming to the presser because they got to catch their flight to get back. But we had a little bit of extra time with Armando, and Armando is a wonderful spokesman for things like that. But if you're a Carolina fan, you got to hope that his words trickle down. Yeah. It's not just one guy over here speaking out and saying all that's wrong, and the other guys are like, well, I don't totally agree, so we're moving on. And that happens in any organization. Just because a guy drops an S-bomb and says I'm pissed and stuff like that doesn't mean that the rest of the team is gravitating to that mindset. That said, RJ said he was pissed. And then Hubert was asked in the postgame about what Armando said. And Hubert, I don't think he said pissed, because I don't know if Hubert says that word.
I don't think he does.
But he agreed, and he's angry. He did say he's angry, and he should be. David and I had the podcast, and David was very clear. He says, I'm not going to say they turn a corner. Can't say that yet. And I said, yeah, I think that they're kind of on that curve. Turning the corner isn't a one snap thing. It's a process. We love that word process, but it truly is a process. Go out for a drive tonight, take a right or take a left. It's an actual process, right? Mm-hmm. And it's that way for a basketball team. So they were turning and they were looking the other way, and they ran into something. And now the cops are there, and they're showing insurance papers, and now they're going to have to pay your insurance, got to pay for the other guy's damage and the bumper and all that kind of stuff. So that's what happened to them today. Since I've really been rolling on these.
That's good, man. That's a good one. That might be your best one yet. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it's not a lot of competition actually, but I think that's Armando's a great spokesman for the team, but Armando is also a unique guy. So I don't think he always expresses what the team thinks. He expresses what Armando thinks. But I think the team needs to listen to him. Mm-hmm. I think if there's one voice they need to hear all the time in that locker room, it's him, because he's not going to BS them. There's no player speak. We hear the term coach speak, but there's also player speak. And with Armando, we're not going to get player speak. Look at the exchange I had with him when I was asking him about what happened when Carolina was going away from him. So what if he's being double teamed? He's Armando freaking Bacot.
Yeah.
So what? The guys at Pitt, I think Jeff Capel does a wonderful job using those guys. And I think this club might make the tournament, right? But Armando should dominate those guys. Mm-hmm. And he was dominating them. And they went away from it. And the way Armando is looking me right in the eye when I'm asking that, it's like you knew he wanted to say more. Mm-hmm. You knew it. And he actually can contain himself. So kudos to him. But I think it was very clear. Now that has to be imparted on the other guys. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, though. You lose by 2 on the road against what might be an NCAA tournament team. I think in the grand scheme of things this isn't terrible. North Carolina fans and North Carolina Tar Heel Nation, whatever people call it, has a tendency to way overreact to losses. I think, to me, not the overreaction, but the serious concern is 31-14. Yeah. I think up to that point, they were playing a good game. It looked to me like, this is a good-looking club, taking care of business. Not always pretty, not always smooth. They're going to throw the ball away. They get shots blocked. They miss easy shots at times, but they're on the road and they're up 9. I thought, this is a professional performance in a lot of ways, getting a win, thinking at that point they were going to win, but the bottom fell out. That's where the concern is. The first 29 minutes or 28 minutes and 5 seconds, I thought they were a really good basketball team. The last 11:55, I thought they were horrible. Mm-hmm. And that's what they need to focus on, because if there's a lesson to be learned aside from the whole throat thing that I was talking about, you got to play 40 minutes in the ACC, especially on the road. Mm-hmm. Got it.
No doubt. There's no doubt about it, man. No doubt about it. And like you said, Pitt did. They got hot when it mattered most down the stretch and end up winning the game by 2. So got to give major credit to Pittsburgh, who, like you said, I do think is a better team than a lot of people expected. A lot of people probably still think. I think today could have proved that a team that seems to just have Carolina's number too. You go look at the last couple of years. It's a team that just finds a way to beat North Carolina and at least play good games against North Carolina. So
they always have a guy that Carolina struggles stopping.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Always, man. Always somebody who torches them. And icing on the cake, this guy was originally from Charlotte as well, so in-state kid, so that might have had a little bit of something to do with it too. So
yeah, I saw that on Twitter. I like how those guys that don't know who he is until he scorches Carolina, and suddenly they're jumping on Hubert for not recruiting.
Yeah, not recruiting. So whatever. Yeah, exactly. That, you know how hindsight's 2020, right?
You want him over one of your guys? Okay, whatever.
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. But
I love fans. Fans give us employment, right?
100%. And you get it, man. You're a massive Orioles fan. I'm a massive Manchester United fan. I'm as delusional as ever when they lose too. It comes with it. You get emotional. I mean, I completely understand it. Trust me.
That's why I laugh with it. That's why I laugh with it.
100%. Because we're doing the same thing with our own teams. But AJ, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. 76-74 loss for North Carolina, dropping another ACC game to Pittsburgh, falling to 1-2 in the conference, 9-5 overall. Make sure you keep it locked to TarIllustrated.com for all your coverage from today's game. And obviously leading up to the Wake Forest and Notre Dame games coming up here over the next week, too. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones for another episode of our Three Things Post-Game podcast. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. See you guys in the next one. Thanks.